When the war in Vietnam began, military commanders were pretty much certain that speed and altitude alone would keep helicopters safe in this new way of warfare. Well, they were wrong, and enemy fire very soon forced a painful rethink. Through a not-so-easy journey, the lessons they learned led to the Cobra gunship and the whole concept of the attack helicopter we have today. But how did door gunners lead to improvised, then purposefully built gunship helicopters? You're about to find out. At the start of the war, the UH-1 Huey was nothing more than an airborne truck. A pilot, co-pilot, and crew chief hauled infantry squads and supplies across paddies and elephant grass, trusting that altitude changes and sharp maneuvers would keep them more or less safe. However, the usually predictable flight paths and slow hovering speed while inserting or extracting troops at hot landing zones made them completely exposed to enemy fire. Casualty reports climbed horrifically, to the point of almost half the helicopters sent to Vietnam being destroyed by the end of the war. Helicopters needed protection, and they needed it yesterday. The first stopgap was to remove the cabin doors, strap an M60 machine gun to a bungee cord, and let the crew chief lean out to return fire. That helped a bit, but it only covered one flank, so a fourth man, the so-called shotgun rider, meaning the designated door gunner, was added to the crew to guard the opposite side. He quickly became an important part of the crew, trained to improve the overall performance of a helicopter in combat, assist pilots during landings, provide covering fire, help with loading and unloading, and support helicopter maintenance. They were trained to fire from a moving helicopter at moving targets on the ground and to compensate in their aiming. They had 2,000 rounds between their boots and learned to ration every belt, since resupply mid-flight was impossible. Protection, on the other hand, was minimal. Flak jackets stopped fragments, not rifle rounds, and ceramic chest plates were so heavy and bulky that many gunners left them on the staging pad. The only real defense was altitude, speed, and the sheer curtain of fire they could lay down during approach, touchdown, and takeoff, since those were the most dangerous and vulnerable moments. M60s were soon upgraded with miniguns and grenade launchers to boost firepower. So, door gunners were now saving a lot of Hueys, but their casualty rate was the highest in any helicopter crew position, which is logical as they were literally hanging out of the helicopter and firing at the enemy. Once it became clear that a door gunner and a crew chief weren't enough to protect helicopters flying into combat zones, field units began modifying Hueys into improvised gunships. It started informally, with maintenance crews attaching spare weapon mounts, rocket pods, and grenade launchers onto the sides of UH-1Bs and later UH-1Cs. These early Huey gunships were still based on the same transport helicopter, but now as a much more capable fighting unit, the added firepower gave them a new role. Their job was to fly ahead of or alongside troop carriers, soften up landing zones with suppressive fire, and protect the more vulnerable slicks as they touched down or lifted off, until they too ran into problems. These modified Hueys carried a mix of weapons. The side doors still had M60 machine guns, but now they had more powerful systems mounted externally. Twin rocket pods could hold up to 38 Hydra 70 rockets. Some had miniguns fixed forward, while others used a chin-mounted 40mm grenade launcher for arcing fire into tree lines. These combinations gave the Huey enough firepower to clear a small landing zone, help suppress enemy fire during an extraction, or just support ground units in trouble. However, the results in practice revealed several major problems. First, all the added weapon systems increased the weight of the helicopter, which directly reduced its hover time. This meant they couldn't stay over the battlefield long enough to support multiple waves of troop insertions or prolonged ground engagements. Second, the weapons were mounted on a frame that was never designed for attack roles. Remember, the Huey was made with transport in mind. The larger profile also made it an easier target. There was no protection for vital system components, and its limited speed and maneuverability still left it vulnerable to everything from small arms, machine guns, to anti-aircraft fire. Door gunners remained exposed in the open sides, and while the firepower had improved, the fundamental weaknesses of the airframe hadn't changed. On the other hand, the tactical concept was clearly working. Air cavalry tactics using helicopters to insert and support troops deep into enemy territory were undoubtedly effective. But those troops needed protection going in and coming out, and Huey gunships simply couldn't fly for that long or carry enough ammunition for the job. The army now needed a helicopter that could do everything the Huey gunship did, and more, but faster, with better survivability and without crews exposing themselves so much. More importantly, it needed to be able to loiter longer, respond quicker, and stay close to the fight without dragging down the tempo of the whole operation. That's when the concept of a dedicated attack helicopter was born. Instead of strapping guns to a transport helicopter, engineers would build one with combat at its core. Bell Helicopter already had experience with the Huey, and they used that to develop this attack helicopter faster. Instead of designing something from scratch, they took the UH-1's proven engine, rotor system, and transmission, then removed everything that wasn't essential. The result was the AH-1 Cobra, a slim, tandem-seat helicopter with a narrow fuselage that drastically reduced drag and target profile, and the first attack helicopter ever. It could fly faster, stay longer in the air, and carry more than enough firepower to ruin a day for the enemy on the ground, all while being harder to kill. The gunner was placed in the front seat and the pilot behind and above him, giving both clear views of the terrain and targets ahead. More importantly, both crew members had flight controls, so if one was injured or killed, the other could still bring the helicopter home. For armament, the AH-1G Cobra had a rotating chin turret, usually fitted with a 7.62mm minigun, a 40mm grenade launcher, or a combination of both. Under the short stub wings, it could carry up to 4 rocket pods loaded with Hydra rockets. Depending on the mission, Cobras could load up to 38 rockets, along with thousands of rounds for the turret systems. Later versions carried anti-armor missiles such as the AGM-22, although these were not commonly used early in Vietnam. Protection was kept light by design. The Cobra had some armor plating around the cockpit and vital systems, along with bullet-resistant glass, but its survival came mostly from maneuverability and speed. At around 170 miles per hour, it was fast enough to reach units in contact before they were overrun. Its ability to hug the terrain at low altitude gave it an advantage, to stay hidden, then pop up and attack from unexpected directions. Most importantly, it could stay in the air much longer than Hueys, supporting multiple waves if needed. Cobras could now go ahead of slicks, soften up landing zones, support the insertion or medevacs, and then stay a bit longer to help ground units if needed. The first Cobras arrived in Vietnam in August 1967, and they were deployed almost immediately. Compared to armed Hueys, they were significantly more efficient and survivable. The Cobra now offered something that hadn't existed before, a fast, flexible, and fully combat-focused aircraft that could react faster and more precisely than fixed-wing air support and operate in tighter spaces. Once the AH-1 Cobra proved itself as a fast and reliable escort, commanders began adapting it for more than just direct fire support. One of the most effective tactical developments came with the introduction of hunter-killer teams. These combined fast scout helicopters with armed Cobras to locate and destroy enemy positions that were hidden in the jungle. The OH-6A, nicknamed the Loach, was mostly used as bait, flying low to provoke enemy fire and reveal hidden positions, ideally without being shot down. But quite a few were, unsurprisingly. Its job was to draw fire, spot movement, and then mark enemy positions with smoke grenades or direct radio calls. Meanwhile, the Cobra loitered higher, just outside enemy view, ready to attack once contact was made. The moment the Loach drew fire or spotted activity, the Cobra would dive in to obliterate the targets. This tactic was extremely effective, but it came with obvious risks, especially for the Loach crews that were regularly being shot down. One of the clearest examples of how far these tactics could be pushed came during a mission on June 18, 1968. First Lieutenant Larry Taylor was flying his Cobra gunship in support of a long-range reconnaissance patrol that had been surrounded deep in enemy territory. With the patrol under heavy fire and no chance of safe extraction by transport helicopter, Taylor and his wingman flew repeated low-level attack runs to keep the enemy back. They stayed in the area for over 40 minutes, firing nearly all their rockets and ammunition and using artillery for illumination to guide their attacks in darkness. When fuel was nearly gone and ammunition was exhausted, with a strong enemy force still closing in, it was clear that the recon team could not be saved by conventional means. Taylor then made a decision that went far beyond his role. He instructed the patrol team to move to a nearby clearing, while he turned on the lights of his Cobra to draw enemy fire and buy them a chance to move. He fired his last ammunition to shave off all the weight he could, as he had already calculated that the trip back would be longer than their remaining fuel range. Then, he landed his Cobra under fire in a small clearing, and told the 4 men to climb onto the skids and rocket pods, since there were no seats in a Cobra besides those for the pilots. He flew them out of the kill zone, clinging to the outside of the aircraft, bringing all of them back alive. For that action, he was later awarded the Medal of Honor. As the Vietnam War progressed, the Cobra established itself as a core part of air cavalry operations. The lessons learned during its deployment laid the foundation for the next generation of attack helicopters. After Vietnam, the Army began looking for a platform with greater range, more advanced targeting systems, and improved survivability against modern threats. That process eventually led to the development of the AH-64 Apache. While it shared very few components with the Cobra, its overall concept and a primary mission of ground attack was a direct evolution of what the Cobra had already been doing. It all began with crew chiefs firing M60s out of open doors over improvised Huey gunships, all the way to the Cobra and the entire attack helicopter concept we have today. If you found this video interesting, you can check our channel for more military history.